Welcome to Hey Dancer. I'm your host, Miller DeRay, an ex-pro teen dancer returning to the game 3 decades later. And one of the things I have noticed in my return to dance journey is how much dance has changed. Now, I'm going to get into all of that, all the different changes, and I do talk in my social media often with regard to a lot of these changes. Today, we're going to be specific. It's going to be relegated to one of these changes. If you've seen the title of the podcast, you can guess what it is: acro. Now, I talk about this topic often in my social media. Not that I have myself in this present day moment in my return to dance. I'm not competing. I'm not really taking dance classes where they're throwing in a bunch of back handsprings and stuff. But I have certainly witnessed, because when I stepped away from dance, I stepped away from dance. I'm talking, I had zero knowledge of anything happening in dance today, which means I didn't watch shows like So You Think You Can Dance. The social media platform I was on, that algorithm was not designed to show me dance because I was not looking up dance at all. And now, since I've returned to dance and everything in my life is dance, 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 I am seeing so many of the changes in dance that I not only firsthand experienced, in class training. Watching these dance reality shows, I was astonished to see not just tricks usurping so much dance, musicality, artistry. I mean, I love tricks. I was a fan of tricks growing up. I wanted to learn as much as possible. When I say tricks, I mean, crazy high leaps and extensions and multiple pirouettes and, things like that. But they're dance related. They involve technique. I think of those as tricks, because you can be a dancer who has trained all your life and you still may suck at doing more than 2 pirouettes, but you're a genius dancer. So to me, those things kind of fall in line with tricks. I'm talking about, for this particular episode, when social media is serving me dance comps, when dance reality shows, a soloist comes up and half of their combo is acro, contemporary, lyrical jazz, whatever their style. It's just acro, flips, tumbling, and oftentimes it's disconnected from the story they're telling. It's not flowing with the music, because I fully embrace, one aerial in a lyrical piece where it flows, but all of a sudden it's taking over the combination. And this is what I admit I struggle with, and I admit also that I'm kind of ignorant as to all of this. I'm not in the competition circuit. I'm not a dance parent. I'm just saying what I'm seeing a lot, and I think it's a sad evolution. It's a sad development in dance. Probably also there is an element of these college dance teams also, where again it's just tricks and acro with dance. This wasn't around nearly as much when I was younger, and I fully recognize that things change and they evolve, and I think that's often a beautiful thing. But when we're getting away from the artistry, and when dance is now there's a blurry line, and it's tumbling passes and all of that versus actual dance, I do find it somewhat disconcerting and a development that I don't think behooves the dance world. Now, all that said, let me get to the point of this particular podcast, because I have, again, very often, and my clips on this topic have often gone viral. People have sent me DMs, and there have been comments about me being anti-acro. I've gotten emails, dance parents upset with me because their child works so hard to get acro because it's so needed today. And I'm just speaking authentically what I'm seeing. It's really, more than anything, less a judgment and it's more a commentary. It's less my opinion and it's more, this is what I'm seeing. Although I did just say, a little bit ago, that I don't love this development and I think it's a little bit disconcerting for the artistry's sake of dance. I do my reels, I got quotes, I got text posts, and one of the ones that did really well was me talking about these icons of dance from, Fred Astaire to Gwen Verdon, and they didn't tumble. And then I eventually made a talking head reel backing up this statement of mine. Recently, I put up this early morning quote to inspire young dancers specifically, because I have seen this trend of acro more and more over the years, and I just want to remind young dancers acro is not needed for a career in dance. And I was quick to write in there was no record I could find of these dance greats doing acro. So then, of course, some people were like, well, Gwen Verdon did sometimes and Bob Fosse did sometimes. I found 3 examples of Gwen Verdon doing a cartwheel. A cartwheel. Bob Fosse did, in 2 examples I could find, a backflip. Now, I think that these examples sort of prove my point because the acro was used once in a minimum 3-minute number, sometimes up to 5 minutes. It was a surprise element, and it was used to enhance the story, and it really flowed with the choreography. And the fact that Bob Fosse could do a backflip and chose to do it very sparingly really speaks volumes. I don't think it makes Verdon or Fosse, by the way, an acro dancer. I mean, I remember once seeing Meryl Streep live, I think it was in Central Park, in The Seagull, and she did a cartwheel in that production. Now, I guess by some people's standards, this would make Meryl Streep an acro actress. Who knew? Anyway, let's get down to the juicy part here, because I have gotten comments that were like, you just don't like this because you can't do acro, because you could never do acro. Well, I was a gymnast before I was a dancer. Editor Miller here. I just had to pause this for a moment just to clarify that I was born a dancer and I always was dancing. I just meant here that I took gymnastics classes. I took lessons in gymnastics long before I ever took lessons in dance. Gymnastics, tumbling always came really easy to me, and it was always incorporated into my dance. When a choreographer was aware that I could do it, they would throw it in there somewhere. There's the big surprise, if you will. For example, when my sister and I were on Star Search, the #1 TV competition show of its time, and let me just pause on that for a second. It's important to note that Star Search was not a dance TV competition show. It was a talent competition show. There were comedians, there were singers, there were musicians, there were spokesmodels. I mean, it had all different categories, including dance. And our choreographer knew the show. She had in the past prior dance groups get on the show. And she was very smart because she said to us, these judges don't know from dance. And she was right. We began to really pay attention to who the judges were. And by the way, my sister and I, we were ginormous fans. Anybody who was an up-and-coming talent, in the early 80s were huge fans of Star Search. It was the biggest show of its time. To put things into, perspective, there weren't a lot of TV channels, back in the day. There were the couple, the NBC, ABC, CBS, the primetime channels. And that was like pretty much it, and it was in the Nielsen ratings in the top 20, many, many millions of people watching a week versus today. You have endless channels to choose from. So if you were on Star Search, it was huge. And it was our dream to be on the show. So, and that'll be a whole other podcast, our experience on the show and auditioning and all the things. But this is just about the acro part. So our choreographer was like, these judges, they're music producers. They're soap opera actors. They don't know from dance. You doing 4 pirouettes, they're not going to know any better. What they are going to know is high energy and flips and smiles, and that's what we served them. And you have to know, I fought this choreographer, who I love and adore, by the way. I remember butting heads with her a little bit. My 16-year-old self, he spoke his mind, because I recall being frustrated that my sister and I were way better dancers than we were appearing to be in these dance routines, I'm like, come on, we can do 4 pirouettes. We can do this leap and whatever. And she said, no, I want you guys just to keep it, with the acro. Although that term wasn't used then. That's another change, by the way. Acro wasn't used back then. I mean, acrobatics is the term, obviously, but it was called just tumbling gymnastics. Acro, like combo, wasn't really used back then. Anyway, this podcast, I promise, is not going to be a whole lot of back in the day. She was correct, because dance groups were going on, and that stage, by the way, I remember, and she knew this too, was ice. It was so slippery. And so, it was very tricky. It was just probably not safe to get on there and be like, God, I hope my technique is like really good today. Instead, it was like, let's throw in the flips and the smiles and the high energy. And we got all the way to the finals. We were the top 2 in our category. That was a huge thing. Now, if you're listening to this, you won't see, and I promise you that this podcast will be, you don't have to watch it, but this is one of those examples where I will be showing some footage, and here we see us on Star Search flipping along. So I think it's important to note also that the dance competition shows today are dance shows, right? And we're seeing so much acro. That to me is something that doesn't marry well in my head, at least. Now, I didn't know from dance competitions back in the day. They didn't really, at least in California, I wasn't aware of them. I never heard dancers talking about them. Teachers never talked about them. Like, seriously, no competitions. I know that they existed around the country. I know that maybe some kids grew up in that culture. My point is, it's not like what it is now by any stretch of the imagination. I knew of one competition. It was the Music Center Spotlight Award, and I talk about this in great detail. In my pilot episode for my Return to Dance docuseries, I share this award with dance legends like Misty Copeland, Lex Ishimoto, who won So You Think You Can Dance, and Scott Myrick, who has danced on tour with everybody from Taylor Swift to Demi Lovato. I mean, so it's the hugest dance competition award. And I performed a lyrical piece, and I could tumble. I could do all kinds of things. And obviously, I did not, except I had the brilliant idea. I choreographed a piece. It was co-choreographed, and I had the idea to throw in, and I promise I had never known anyone who did this. I had never seen anyone who did this, but I thought, okay, this lyrical piece at the very end, literally the last, 20 seconds of the piece, I thought I'm going to throw in an aerial because it really enhances the story. This is before I even had any clue that Bob Fosse, for example, threw in a backflip at the very end of a 4-minute piece that gave it like a sort of like, that like moment. It made it more special. That's the thing too also, when there's so much acro thrown in, it takes away from the surprise element, right? From the excitement, from the uniqueness of it. It's not special anymore when there's so much of it. But throw in one tumbling pass or aerial or backflip, one at the very end of a 4-minute piece, which is what I did for this piece where I eventually won, then I feel like it enhances the story and it flows if it's done right. I just had this instinct like, I think this could work really well here. When I was at the Joffrey Ballet School in New York City and I had a full scholarship, I got the lead in this summer choreographic presentation, this big show they put on in the summer. And obviously, no acro, no tumbling, none of that. But I remember for my bow at the end, I was the last one to come out. I thought, I'm going to throw in an aerial here. And you can see by, I have that footage, you can see by the dancers' faces behind, like the shock of it. Like, what? What is this? Tumbling? A flip? What is he doing? And I thought this could be fun at the very end. And so I kind of threw that into my bow, knowing that it would be special. Editor Miller here. So as I'm working on this, I have this very distant memory. And when I say distant, I mean the recesses of my mind. And I'm like, wait. Did I do something in this piece that was maybe tumbling a little bit? And so I found the footage, and side note, me having footage of my dance past is almost non-existent. I have basically nothing. I've often said over the years that my best dancing was never caught on film back then. And also to this minute, my return to dance in class right now, currently, also, my best dancing has not been captured on film. I'm going to have to work on this clearly moving forward. Anyway, I do have this stuff from the Joffrey. And lo and behold, I find it. And guess what? There's me doing a round-off back tuck, as you can see. Now, what must have happened is this particular piece was a non-ballet piece. There were moments that were balletic, but mostly it was funky, it had hip-hop, it had jazz. The fact that it incorporated these many styles and not so much ballet, which was not my forte back then, is probably why I got the lead in this piece. And the choreographer probably loved the idea to have this surprise element, as I like to say, used very sparingly, but me doing a round-off back tuck would have been a surprise, and it was. You can tell by the audience's reaction. And so there you are, full disclosure. And of course, I acknowledge that the more things you can do, crazy dance tricks, acro, adding those things to your toolbox, your dance toolbox, the better your chances are at booking jobs. It puts you above somebody else. I mean, I think that's obviously a truism. I remember going to dance auditions way back in the day, and I remember very, very clearly feeling special because not many people back then were doing acro. And at some point, at almost every audition I had, the choreographer, casting director, whatever, producer, I don't know, I just remember many times somebody would say, all right, can anybody do, some gymnastics? Can anybody tumble? And there you are. I would be just like, yeah, proud, raise my hand, one of the very, very few, and I'd do a tumbling pass here and there, and people would scream. Hey there, Editor Miller here. Again, this may be a running theme on my podcast. Who knows? I just wanted to note that, while you might book a couple of extra gigs because of your acro and your crazy dance tricks, let's think longevity. In 10, 20, 30 plus years from now, tricks and acro are not going to be needed, and more often than not, the dancers who were flippin' and trickin' are not going to be around in the future dancing because their bodies were put through, usually, way too much in their youth. My tumbling pass back in the day was, I think, most often a round-off back handspring back tuck. That was probably my best. I could do a back pike, but not a back layout that great. Never could do a standing back tuck. I could do a round-off multiple back handsprings. And also, just speaking of my childhood, I remember taking gymnastics when I was probably 9 or 10, and didn't take it very long, only for a couple of years, and somehow just practiced on my own and just kind of got better and better at doing it just around the house. I have memories of my sister and I being at Magic Mountain and just tumbling down the pathways, and people like, what the hell? My sister and I, we were tumblers. I was a gymnastics, and still am, but not as much, a gymnastics freak. You are talking to somebody who literally recorded, this is back in the day of the VCR and VHS tapes, and I recorded all the gymnastics competitions. Oh my God, the highlight, one of the main highlights of my childhood was the 1984 Olympics. Are you kidding? My family has all these stories about me. I would watch those gymnastics comps, and the remote control somehow had the feature of slow motion, and I would slow motion before even the TV, the commentators, before that was even a thing as much. They were doing it, but I was obsessed. I would slow motion everybody's routine. I know a lot of their names still, and I haven't even thought about this, I don't think, in decades. Of course, Mary Lou Retton, oh my God, her perfect 10 on the floor and the vault and that clinch to the gold. Are you kidding me? That's a huge memory of happiness from my childhood. And who else from that team? There was Julianne McNamara and Kathy Johnson and Tracy Talavera. I remember their names, and the guys too, Bart Connor, Tim Daggett, Mitch Gaylord. Come on now. You're a huge gymnastics fan. I used to, all the competitions, all those subsequent years. And then somewhere around the early 90s, maybe after the whole Carrie Strug thing, I kind of started to phase out of paying too much attention because it kind of bugged me. I don't know, that gymnasts are put through so much and I didn't love it, and maybe, I don't know, I just didn't care as much anymore, I guess. Plus, I grew up. I used to be a huge baseball fan. I stopped caring about that too. Whatever, we grow up. Hey there, Editor Miller here. I just wanted to interject something really quick. When I said we grow up, I just meant that your taste evolves, it changes as you get older. You may continue being a baseball fan or a gymnastics fan, or you may not. It's not a commentary on baseball or gymnastics being for kids only. Hopefully that's clear. I could just always tumble if I wanted to. I remember in my early 30s, just walking around, and I said to a friend, hey, and I just ran and did an aerial. I hadn't tried to do an aerial by that point probably in over 10 years. I don't even know how I didn't pull a hamstring or something, but I did it. Actually, interesting story. In my return to dance journey, when I first began classes at Millennium OC, one of the classes that I took, which I talk about a lot in episode, I think, 3 of my docuseries, and I don't think I told this story. I don't remember. I may have taken it out. But she would have us do improv across the floor. And one of the times, because I really struggled in this contemporary class, I'm like, what the hell, improv across the floor? I wasn't a fan. And she had said, I don't care what you guys do across the floor. Tap dance, do jazz, whatever. And I thought, oh, that gave me permission to do things that, felt more comfortable to me, that maybe I haven't done them in almost 3 decades, but it wasn't this weird contemporary stuff that was super confusing to my brain. And I remember doing a cartwheel back handspring step out. What the hell was I thinking in my mid-40s, just doing that out of nowhere? But I did, and everybody screamed. My point is, I'm a tumbler. I can still whip that shit out if I need to. You know what I'm saying? And I love it. I freaking love it. So if I am commenting on this sad state of affairs that I feel is occurring with this advent of just acro taking over so much of dance, that's probably saying something. It's probably saying a little something right there. So I'm sure there's more I can say, but hey, this is like one of my first podcast episodes and me just speaking off the cuff, stream of consciousness, sharing a story, trying to cover all the things. And how do I bring it all in together and touch on this, touch on that? I think I did it. I think I did a pretty okay job. It is now done. So hey, if you enjoyed the podcast, I hope you did. Please follow along. Make sure you are subscribed. Follow whatever app you're on. Depends, whether or not you follow or subscribe. Rate it. Please give it 5 stars. Give a review. Let's get the word out. Share it with others. Share it with your dance friends. And I will see you next time. Yeah, gymnastics. I love it. I love it so much. I just don't love how it has taken over so much of dance today. It concerns me, but I've said my piece. All right, until next time.